Did you know that over 3,000 people in the UK are sleeping rough every single night? And that number is rising faster than ever. Even more shocking, more than 750 homeless people died on the streets last year alone. That's almost 2 lives lost every day. Not in a war zone, not in a distant country, but right here in one of the world's richest nations. What's really going on? We walk past them every day, tents under bridges, sleeping bags in doorways, cardboard signs begging for help. But what we're seeing is just the tip of a much deeper crisis. Behind every homeless person is a story the system failed to catch. And this isn't just about addiction or bad luck. There are 10 critical reasons behind the UK's growing homeless population, and some of them will truly surprise you. In this video, we're digging deep into the causes of this national emergency, from broken policies and mental health failures to rising rents and silent abuse. These are the stories the headlines don't always tell. By the end, you'll see the full picture and why this crisis could hit closer to home than you think. Stay with us. Number 1. The cost of living crisis. In today's UK, it's not just the jobless or struggling who are becoming homeless. It's also working families, single parents, and even students. The cost of everyday life has surged to unbearable levels. Food prices have skyrocketed, energy bills have doubled, and private rents are hitting record highs across the country. For many, rent now takes up over half of their monthly income. One missed paycheck, a sudden bill, or a landlord's rent hike can tip someone from stability into survival mode. And when the choice comes down to heating your home or paying rent, something has to give. And too often, it's the roof over your head. This crisis isn't just affecting those already on the edge, it's dragging thousands into poverty for the first time. According to the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, millions of people in the UK are now living in deep poverty, and councils are seeing a surge in families seeking emergency accommodation. But with temporary housing in short supply and shelters overwhelmed, people are left with nowhere to go. It's no longer a rare sight to see children growing up in B&Bs, sleeping on floors, or even ending up on the streets. These are not isolated cases. They are signs of a national emergency. What's terrifying is how invisible this crisis can feel until it hits home. 1 in 5 renters now worry they won't be able to pay next month's rent. Even people with decent jobs are finding that their wages simply can't keep up. The working poor is no longer a term reserved for developing countries. It's becoming a harsh reality in modern Britain. And unless something changes, the line between doing okay and homeless is getting thinner by the day. This isn't just about poverty. It's about a system that's pushing people off the edge, one bill at a time. Number 2. Lack of affordable housing. In the UK today, finding an affordable home feels more like winning the lottery than a basic human right. Over the last few decades, social housing has been sold off, underfunded, or simply never built, leaving a massive gap between those who need homes and the supply available. Private rents have surged in every region, and yet the number of truly affordable homes hasn't kept pace. In fact, for every 100 families in need of social housing, only around 10 homes become available. This shortage is driving vulnerable people straight into overcrowded living, sofa surfing, or ultimately, the streets. The term affordable housing itself has become misleading. Many new developments are labeled as affordable, but in reality, they are priced far out of reach for low-income families. The government's own figures show that over 1.2 million people are currently on social housing waiting lists, and in some areas, the wait can stretch over a decade. Meanwhile, many older social housing units are being demolished to make room for luxury apartments that remain empty, bought up by investors rather than lived in by locals. The result? Fewer homes for those who need them most. This housing crisis isn't just a matter of supply. It's a reflection of political choices. Policies that once protected the working class, like rent control and council house building, have been slowly dismantled. With fewer safety nets and rising property prices, people are being forced out of their communities, priced out of their cities, and left with nowhere to go. Families are crammed into single rooms. Young people can't move out, and the most vulnerable are left out in the cold, literally. Until the country treats housing as a necessity and not an investment, homelessness will only keep rising. Number 3. Welfare cuts and delays. For many people teetering on the edge of homelessness, the benefit system is supposed to be the safety net that catches them before they fall. But in reality, that net is full of holes. Over the past decade, the UK has seen a series of deep cuts to welfare spending, stricter eligibility rules, and long delays in payments, especially under universal credit. What was meant to simplify the system has left many waiting 5 weeks or more for their first payment. That's more than enough time to fall into rent arrears, face eviction, and end up on the street. The most vulnerable are often hit the hardest: single parents, disabled individuals, people with mental health conditions, and those fleeing domestic abuse. When payments are delayed or reduced without warning, people can't pay bills, can't buy food, and have no way to keep a roof over their heads. Sanctions, where payments are cut off completely due to missed appointments or paperwork issues, have become alarmingly common. Sometimes, it's just a missed bus or a doctor's note that wasn't uploaded in time. And yet the consequences are life-changing. Losing a small amount of money each week might seem minor to some, but for someone living in poverty, it can be the difference between surviving and spiraling. What's worse is how hard it can be to fix these issues once they start. Appeals take time, support lines are understaffed, and many people simply give up, exhausted by the complexity of the system. Local councils, food banks, and charities are being overwhelmed by people who are let down by the system that was meant to protect them. This isn't just about red tape. It's about a growing number of people falling through the cracks because bureaucracy got in the way of basic human needs. Until the welfare system becomes faster, fairer, and more supportive, homelessness will remain its tragic outcome. Number 4. Mental health services in crisis. Mental health and homelessness are deeply connected, yet the support systems meant to help have been stretched to breaking point. Across the UK, NHS mental health services are underfunded, understaffed, and overwhelmed. Long waiting lists mean that people in crisis are often left without treatment for weeks or even months. For someone already struggling with anxiety, depression, PTSD, or psychosis, that wait can be dangerous. When the mind is in turmoil and there's no help in sight, losing a job, falling out with family, or ending up homeless becomes far more likely. But it doesn't stop there. Once someone becomes homeless, their mental health often gets worse. The trauma of living on the streets, exposure to violence, lack of sleep, constant fear, and being treated as invisible only deepens existing conditions. And yet, accessing help becomes even harder. You can't get a GP appointment without a fixed address. You can't fill out forms when you don't have an ID or internet access. Many rough sleepers fall into a cycle. Untreated mental illness leads to homelessness, and homelessness makes recovery nearly impossible. It's a cruel loop, and one that too many people never escape. Frontline workers and charities report that more than half of rough sleepers have a diagnosed mental health condition, yet they rarely receive consistent care. Crisis teams are stretched thin, and community mental health services often only intervene once a person reaches rock bottom, or worse, after an arrest or hospitalization. The truth is, we can't fix homelessness without fixing mental health care. People need early intervention, ongoing support, and systems that don't shut them out because of their circumstances. Until then, we'll keep seeing vulnerable people fall through the cracks, isolated, untreated, and left behind by a system that's supposed to care. Number 5. Drug and alcohol dependency. One of the most common assumptions about homelessness is that it's caused by addiction. But the reality is far more complex, and often the opposite. For many people, drug and alcohol dependency doesn't lead to homelessness. It develops after it. Life on the streets is brutal, unsafe, and emotionally crushing. Substances can become a way to cope with trauma, numb physical pain, or simply survive cold nights without sleep. When you're exposed to danger every day, addiction can feel like the only escape, not the problem itself. However, once addiction takes hold, it becomes a major barrier to getting off the streets. Many housing services won't take in people with active drug or alcohol issues, especially when there's limited space. Rehabilitation programs often have long waiting lists or strict entry requirements. Meanwhile, drug and alcohol support services across the UK have seen devastating budget cuts over the past decade. Councils no longer have the resources to run detox centers or outreach programs the way they used to. The few that remain are overwhelmed, and many people are simply left to spiral with no access to help. It's important to understand that addiction and homelessness feed each other in a vicious cycle. Without stable housing, recovery is almost impossible. And without recovery, it's nearly impossible to secure housing. We often see the symptoms: people using on the streets, passed out in alleyways, but we're rarely asked what came first or what support they've tried and failed to get. Treating addiction as a criminal issue, rather than a public health emergency, only pushes people further to the margins. If we want to break this cycle, we need harm reduction strategies, accessible rehab services, and housing-first approaches, because no one can rebuild their life while still sleeping rough. Before we dive into the next reason, take a second to share your thoughts in the comments. What part of this crisis shocks you the most? We put a lot of effort into creating videos that matter, so if you're finding this eye-opening, please subscribe. It's just one click, but it truly helps us keep going. Number 6. Domestic abuse and unsafe homes. For many people, especially women and children, home is not a place of safety, but a place of danger. Every year, thousands flee domestic abuse in the UK, escaping violent partners or family members with nowhere to go. The moment they leave, they are faced with a terrifying reality: become homeless or return to abuse. Women's refugees and emergency shelters are supposed to be the first line of protection, but funding cuts and overstretched services mean they're turning away survivors every day. In some areas, shelters have completely shut down, leaving victims to sleep in cars, on friends' sofas, or out on the street. The situation is even worse for women with children. Many fear that if they report abuse or ask for help, social services might take their children away. Others are stuck because they are financially dependent on their abuser, or because housing benefit changes make it harder for them to rent alone. For those from migrant backgrounds, things are even more complicated. Immigration rules like no recourse to public funds mean that some survivors aren't even allowed to access shelters or benefits, even when they are in clear danger. It creates a system where staying silent feels safer than seeking help. This hidden side of homelessness is often ignored, because it doesn't always look like rough sleeping. But survivors of abuse are one of the fastest growing groups in the UK's homeless population. They move from place to place, live in overcrowded conditions, or rely on strangers for temporary shelter, all while carrying deep emotional and physical scars. If we're serious about tackling homelessness, we need to start treating domestic abuse not just as a crime, but as a direct cause of housing insecurity. Everyone deserves a safe place to live, but for far too many, that basic right remains out of reach. Number 7. Refugees, asylum seekers, and NRPF. Behind closed doors and out of sight, thousands of refugees and asylum seekers in the UK are facing homelessness, not because they've done something wrong, but because of a legal system that denies them access to help. One of the biggest barriers is a policy known as no recourse to public funds, NRPF. This rule prevents many migrants from claiming benefits, including housing support, even if they are lawfully living in the UK. It means that if someone loses their job, escapes abuse, or gets evicted, they are left with no legal way to get help, no matter how desperate their situation. For asylum seekers waiting on a decision, the situation is often worse. They're not allowed to work, are given only a small weekly allowance, barely enough to survive, and are placed in temporary housing that is often overcrowded, poorly maintained, and unstable. When refugee status is finally granted, many are given just 28 days to leave their asylum accommodation, find a job, and secure housing. That's an impossible task for most, especially without savings, a support network, or a knowledge of the system. As a result, many refugees become homeless immediately after being granted the right to stay in the country. This group is particularly vulnerable because they often have no family in the UK, limited English, and deep trauma from fleeing war, persecution, or violence. Yet they are routinely denied access to basic services. Many end up in informal encampments, squatting in unsafe buildings, or completely hidden from public view. Charities have stepped in where the state has stepped back, offering food, shelter, and legal help, but they can only do so much. Until the UK addresses the structural barriers created by NRPF and a hostile immigration system, homelessness among refugees and migrants will continue to grow silently and relentlessly. Number 8. Youth homelessness. Across the UK, tens of thousands of young people are facing homelessness each year, often with little support and even less visibility. Many are not what you'd expect. These are not always people sleeping rough in shop doorways. Youth homelessness is often hidden, couch surfing, sleeping on buses, staying in unsafe hostels, or bouncing between temporary shelters. Some are care leavers who age out of the system at just 18, expected to fend for themselves with minimal preparation. Others are LGBTQ+ teens who've been kicked out by unsupportive families, or young people escaping abuse, neglect, or toxic home environments. The reasons vary, but the outcome is the same: a generation at risk, surviving alone. One of the biggest issues is the lack of tailored housing and support services for young people. Many councils are overwhelmed and underfunded, and young adults often fall through the cracks because they are seen as less of a priority than families with children. Even when help is available, it's often short-term and unstable, temporary hostels that may be unsafe or isolating, with strict rules and little emotional support. On top of that, rents have skyrocketed, and most under 25s receive lower universal credit payments, making it even harder to afford private housing. It's a system that sets them up to fail before they've even had a chance to build a life. Homelessness at a young age leaves deep scars. It disrupts education, damages mental health, and increases the risk of long-term poverty and addiction. Many young people end up stuck in survival mode, unable to plan for the future or find stable work. Without early intervention and long-term support, youth homelessness becomes the first step in a lifetime of instability. If we don't act now, we're not just losing homes, we're losing potential, opportunity, and hope for an entire generation. Number 9. Ex-prisoners and institutional discharge. One of the most overlooked causes of homelessness in the UK is what happens when people are released from prisons, hospitals, or the care system. Each year, thousands of individuals are discharged from institutions with no stable accommodation arranged. For ex-prisoners especially, the moment of release can be a tipping point. Many are handed a small amount of cash and told to find their own way. Without housing, a job, or support, they often end up sleeping rough within days. And once they are on the streets, the chance of reoffending skyrockets, creating a vicious cycle that traps people in instability. The same issue applies to young people leaving care and patients discharged from mental health hospitals. They are often vulnerable, isolated, and poorly prepared to transition into independent living. For example, care leavers might have never learned how to manage bills or secure tenancy, and many have no family to turn to. When they age out of the system at 18 or 21, they're expected to survive on their own, with limited life experience and barely enough financial support to stay afloat. For those with serious health conditions, being discharged without proper aftercare can be a death sentence. What makes this issue so frustrating is that it's entirely preventable. With better planning, joined-up services, and proper funding, no one should be released from a public institution into homelessness. Yet short-term thinking and bureaucratic failures mean that people fall through the cracks every day. Many ex-prisoners end up back behind bars not because they are dangerous, but because they had nowhere to go. This is a systemic failure, not just an individual one. Until we create clear pathways from institutions to secure housing, homelessness will remain a revolving door for the most vulnerable in our society. Number 10. Gentrification and urban redevelopment. In cities across the UK, shiny new buildings and luxury flats are rising fast, but behind the glossy exterior lies a troubling truth. Gentrification and urban redevelopment are pricing out the very people who built these communities. As neighborhoods are revitalized, low-income residents are often forced out, unable to keep up with rising rents or relocated when their homes are demolished. Social housing estates are being knocked down to make way for private developments, and the promise of affordable housing often turns out to be unaffordable for those who need it most. The result is a slow but relentless displacement of vulnerable people. When entire blocks are emptied, families who have lived in the area for generations are uprooted and sent to temporary housing miles away, or worse, left without a home at all. Many never return. At the same time, local services like shelters, day centers, and community hubs are also disappearing, replaced by cafes, co-working spaces, and expensive apartments that sit half-empty. Investors buy properties to hold, not to live in, and the community fabric slowly unravels. The city looks cleaner, newer, but it's become less accessible to those who need it most. This isn't just a housing issue. It's about who gets to live in our cities and who gets pushed out. As the cost of living rises and affordable housing shrinks, homelessness becomes the final stop on a long road of displacement. Gentrification is often marketed as progress, but if it leaves people sleeping in doorways outside the very buildings they used to live in, what kind of progress is that? Until urban development includes genuine protections for low-income residents, and until housing is treated as a right rather than a commodity, the housing crisis will continue to grow, quietly, but powerfully, street by street. Homelessness in the UK isn't just about sleeping rough. It's about a system that fails people at every stage. From soaring rents and broken welfare systems, to mental health neglect and domestic abuse, this crisis is not caused by a single issue. It's the result of 10 deeply connected problems, each adding weight until people are pushed over the edge. And while we often walk past it, ignore it, or look the other way, the truth is, it could happen to anyone. All it takes is a lost job, a broken relationship, or missed payment. But there is still hope, because homelessness is not inevitable. With the right policies, support systems, and compassion, we can reverse this crisis. We can build a society that doesn't just react to homelessness, but prevents it before it begins. It starts with awareness, it grows with pressure on those in power, and it takes all of us choosing not to look away. If this video helped you see things differently, imagine what might change if more people understood what's really going on. Now, we want to hear from you. What do you think is the biggest cause of homelessness today? Or have you seen it growing in your own community? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Your voice could open someone else's eyes. We put an enormous amount of time and care into every video we make. So if this one moved you, please support us. Subscribe to our channel. It's just one click, but it means everything to us. And if you want to keep learning, check out our next video. We'll be right there with another topic that matters.